Hey, friends. Welcome to the Divorce Clarity Studio. I'm your host, Lisa Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. On this podcast, I highlight experts who share their own divorce experiences, both professional and personal. Although each of our stories is unique, we share intrinsic commonalities. My goal is to raise up stories that let you feel seen, give you inspiration to move forward, and foster the courage to stand on your own 2 feet. Ultimately, the Divorce Clarity Studio is here to help you feel less alone, more informed, and more aligned with your values. And you can find this podcast on and I just forgot where, but anywhere you get your podcasts. So let me start again. Today's show is titled, We Need to Talk. Let's have a conversation about domestic violence. And my guest is Tina Huggins. She is a divorce and narcissist conflict specialist. Tina is an invaluable ally, particularly in high conflict and abusive situations. She's a CDC certified high conflict divorce coach, as well as a DCA co-parenting coach. Her work empowers clients to reduce stress, save time, and regain control during divorce, which is one of life's most challenging transitions. Tina also hosts her own show, The Awakening, which is focused on lifting up voices of domestic violence. And you can find her show here also on WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network Radio, podcasts, and TV. I've known Tina for several years now as a colleague on all the divorce support work that I do. So welcome, Tina, to the Divorce Clarity Studio.
Thank you, Lisa, for having me here.
It is my pleasure. So, Tina, you have a deep history of experiences that led you to this work. And I always like to jump in with a big question. Tell us, what's your story? And how did your life lead you to do the work you do now?
Yeah, big story. So I have been coaching for over 30 years and certified as a life coach many years ago because of the type of coaching that I did. My coaching back then was related to mind-body medicine. So everything locks itself into your body. And then around that time frame, I also was in law enforcement. I am a martial arts instructor, and I would teach self-defense at the local battered women's shelter. And I had dealt with situations literally physically putting my body between the abuser and the abused to help get them out of the physical situation. Years later, I found myself, I had met my late husband, and he was going through a very difficult divorce. At the time I met him, it was into 2 years. And he ended up going through that divorce. I ended up working with his attorney doing paper investigation. And I had helped people over the years get divorced. And during that time frame, as my husband was severely abused in the financial realm, I mean, just about I've had to make up words for the type of abuse that I had read through emails and things like that. And so when I realized that this attorney didn't know simple things that I had helped clients with, I'm like, there has to be a better way. And that's when I reached out and found divorce coaches and talked to them. And after he was going through his divorce, I decided I was going to go get certified. And that part is now history. I've just continued my certifications, specifically in that of high conflict and study of abuse and communication.
Yeah, that is amazing. And what you talk about when you talk about his abuse, that it was not necessarily physical, but it was emotional, it was financial, it was psychological. And that is a kind of abuse that many people experience and don't think it's abuse or don't want to call it abuse because that has a stigma. And, I want to go there because that's why we're here to talk. So can you share a little bit more about your history? Because I know you have a deep story that involves abusive situations. So, yeah, can you tell us a little bit more?
So yes, definitely. So my history, my personal history is that I was in a relationship that I didn't see was abusive. And I ended up with a broken hand, separated ribs, dislocated leg. And at no time during any of those, now the dislocated leg I did see as abuse because he threw me out of my vehicle, and that's how that happened.
Yeah.
But at no time earlier did I see that as abuse. And then my
Well,
father,
I'm going to interrupt you for a second there. Like, you never saw it as abuse and you had broken bones. So
Mhm.
tell us a little bit more about that. What was going through your head?
So in most of our cases, those of us who are involved in abuse, physical, but definitely psychological, because all abuse lands psychologically. It happens so slowly. It can happen over months, and in my case, over years. It just progressively got to be more yelling and more screaming. And my oldest son, we said we fought all the time. I didn't see it that way. Apparently, being raised in a home with a mom that screamed and yelled made me, see that as nothing more than just a scream or yell, right?
Yeah.
And then the broken hand happened when he grabbed me. He grabbed a hold of me, and I'm trained. I'm a martial artist. I'm a 5th-degree black belt. So I was able to release that, and my hand hit the door jamb. Shortly after that, he grabbed a hold of me and threw me down on the bed. And the one thing, and he stuck his knee in my chest. That's where the ribs got separated. And he told me, and this was a gaslighting that lasted for 15 years after I got out of that marriage, because this one specific fight happened years before I left him. And 15 years later, I'm like, oh my God, that was not my fault. He gaslit me to said, well, I didn't break your hand. You were the one, had you just relaxed and everything, you wouldn't have got your hand broken. But no, you decided you were going to release that grip, and you are the one who hit that. And then I threw you on the bed and put my knee in your chest to hold you still, because I didn't want you to leave and go hurt yourself. That was a lie. I had left our arguments before, but as I talk about this, the most dangerous time in any relationship is the moment you go to leave. I was just leaving the fight, but this is how the broken bone and separated ribs happened.
That's pretty big. It's the two things come up for me in this conversation. First, that the most dangerous time for any person when they're in an abusive situation is when you go to leave, which is real, which makes it so hard to leave because you fear that moment. And just when you're getting brave enough to stand for yourself, then you get caught in this abusive cycle. And then it's a cycle because it will keep going. And what you just shared about how your ex-husband defended himself in his own mind. He was telling you what he needed to tell himself. Like, I wasn't the one that hurt her. She hurt herself. And I wasn't the one who hurt her. I needed to protect her from herself. Like, those are stories that are manipulations, not just for you, but maybe he scared himself so much that he had to write this new story. And I'm not forgiving him for that or giving him an out. But when we are engaged in a high conflict situation, each party is wrapped up in it and tells different stories to themselves. Like, we all have our inner critic. And that's a dangerous place, because very often in abusive situations, the abuser behaves badly and then crafts a narrative where it's because the person who was abused deserved it or did something to deserve it. And that becomes a dance. How do you see this coming out with the clients that you work with?
So kind of going back just a minute with my ex-husband, is he was extremely manipulative. He knew when he said what he said
Yeah.
that he was creating a narrative, his own narrative, based on the other gaslighting events that took place.
Mhm.
But I see this coming out in my clients in the fact, and I work with clients who have been through the psychological ringer. Their brains are not functioning well. And so I see that they're coming out of this gaslighting, and because they're working with somebody, unlike me, who I didn't work with anybody, taking me 15 years to get on my feet and connect dots, because these people are working with somebody, they're able to start connecting the dots much sooner. They're able to tell their story. They're able to be heard, and out of their own mouth and into their own ears, they tell the story, and finally a picture emerges of the truth. And they're starting to realize, and it's at this point with my poor clients, that now I have to rein them back because now they're ready to stomp their feet and pound their fists. We just can't do that in front of a judge. We have to set the boundaries with our soon-to-be ex, but we definitely don't want to do that in front of a judge.
Well, it's the behavior that all of a sudden we're recognizing, I guess, where we suffered in the relationship, and finally acknowledging it's not our fault. And so the anger comes up, right? Because we have shame, we have disbelief, we have disappointment, we have broken dreams, and all of that can manifest in anger. And so what you and I do with clients is we invite the client to consider how that response is going to play out in court. Like, does that response get you what you want and what you need? And if the answer is no, and most of the time it's no, then let's find a different way to use that energy so that you can get what you want and what you need.
Yes, and when we talk about in front of the judge, we're not necessarily just talking about in the courtroom either. We're talking about over text, over email, and possibly recorded messages that we say to our soon-to-be ex, or in front of the children, or things like that. In front of others, people that could hear and testify. Those are all judges' ears, or their eyes are on those texts. That's what we're considering in front of a judge. So yes, these types of things are very important. And this is where our work as divorce coaches is so important, that we're able to get our client to a place that they can take a deep breath, hold it for a second or two, relax before they speak, before they make a decision, and or come and talk about those decisions before they're made, so that they're made with their head and not through anger emotions.
Yeah. Well, it's about working to build a strategy, right? A strategy is built on responses, not on reactions. And it's the space between the awareness and what you do with that awareness that coaches can help clients enroll in a different process. And that's what we try to do. But I want us to come back to this idea of the challenge of domestic violence in our world and in the world of divorce. So I know, like, as we spoke about it, you experienced it firsthand. But what I've done a little research in, and I found that 1 out of 4 marriages claim that they dissolved because of domestic violence. What do you think about that number? And can you explain it?
So it's stated that 1 in every 3 women are involved in a violent or domestic violence situation, and 1 in every 4 men. So in the course with it being 1 in every 4 marriages, I don't consider that probably a truth, because I know my dad, who was almost murdered in his second relationship. She shot at him and then finally drove over him with a dually pickup truck. He can't use the word abuse in a sentence. And when the cops were called, she's the one who called the cops and she turned him in. So if that specific relationship was counted, it was counted on the wrong side.
Yeah.
Even the police officers knew that. So I believe that it's much higher because my marriage never has been recorded as a DV situation. And I ended up with broken bones.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that really we try to make our clients aware of is that there is no shame in this thing happening to you. And you are allowed to call it what it is, right? So many people who have emotional abuse, financial abuse, coercive control, don't think of that as domestic violence, but it is mental cruelty. And that actually is a cause of action in some states for divorce. So this idea that, you know, we're going to file as a no fault because we don't want to have to prove these things, that doesn't necessarily mean that things didn't happen. And that's something that, you know, we need to keep in mind. There is like a negative response that I hear in the field about claiming that the spouse is a narcissist. And everyone thinks that everybody's spouse is a narcissist. Well, I would argue, no, that's not what I see in my client pool, although many of them share with me that they believe their spouse is a narcissist. And I think it's because in divorce, we are dealing with people who are already in a operating system, right? It's not operating. And so we're already starting with a higher percentage. And if we're looking at narcissism as violence, then we are adding another statistic. You know, is that something that you've experienced with your clients?
Most definitely. You know, when we talk about abuse, most of us on the outside assume that abuse is like my broken bones or they got smacked. And it's very rare that that is the case. And of course, the term narcissist is out there and it's being thrown around like pennies in a wishing well. The reality is that's always been here. We just didn't label it as narcissism. It was called and is still referred to in some circles as psychological abuse or emotional abuse. And I have a man that lives around this area that he's overheard me having conversations, and he actually says that's not abuse. That I don't know how you can call that abuse. Those are the type of people that cause things to be worse because they have no clue. They are themselves being abusive with the statement, because the things that I see with my clients, you know, I have several of them that come to me and they're just so messed up. In fact, I tell people that are on the outside looking in, you might see somebody that's gone through this abuse as having bipolar, because they're frantic. They have their ups and then they'll have their downs. And that's not to do with the mental condition other than they have been pushed to the brink of their mental edge by their abuser.
Yeah. And just one more point is that this idea that, you know, bipolar, they have ups and downs. Narcissists have two different personalities. They have the charming personality that is outside, and then they have the controlling personality that is on the inside. And so what you see when you're the one receiving the negative is far different than what their community might see. So this is really hard stuff. And we keep going, which is great, but we're going to take a quick 30-second break to have a word from our sponsor. And I will be back with Tina Huggins. And we're back with Tina Huggins. We are talking about domestic violence. So, when we left, we had discussed this sort of bipolar dual personality scenario where it's hard for the recipient of the violence to be seen as level-headed, and it's easier for the abusing party to show out in the world one image when inside is something else. It's really a barrier for people to talk about what's happening to them. So what do you see as barriers for people to understand their situation as domestic violence, and what can they do to get help?
So this is kind of a catch here, because most of us that are involved in domestic violence type situations or emotional distress, emotional abuse, we don't know that that's going on. And so that is where our first thing is we need to start communicating, because almost all of us that are in that relationship, we don't tell our families, we don't tell our friends, we don't tell anybody what's really going on, because, maybe it's a one-off, this is the only time they've done that, I can look back over mine. Like I said, my oldest son said we fought all the time. I don't remember it that way because my memory has protected me. We need to first start telling people what's going on. Maybe it's with our best friends. I do that in the relationships that I'm attempting to be in now, whether it's friendships or whatever. I don't talk behind their back type thing. It's not that kind of conversation. It's, the other day this happened and this is the way I responded. And I have a conversation, and those words out of my mouth go into my ears, and I'm able to hear things, because I am never again going to put myself through that. So that's the first thing we've got to do, is talk to people. And then once we realize we're in this type of thing, it's the very best thing is to reach out to a divorce coach who's trained in high conflict, and ask some questions. Get somebody that'll listen to you and kind of be a sounding board for what's next. A divorce coach is usually trained in to help you through the early stages of starting through the divorce process. And in my case, I actually help with an exit plan to get them safely out of the home and their children, if they have children, and safely get their important documents and personal belongings out so that nothing gets hurt. And in that whole course of that process, we're also protecting that abuser. Now that sounds crazy. Why would you want to protect an abuser? Because if we're being good and gentle to him or her and not letting them know what's going on, that's kind of their protection, then they will stay calm during this exit. And the exit is going to take weeks to months. And so we want to keep them calm and keep their conflict in their head down, because that keeps us safe.
Yeah, because we need to recognize that there has to be a strategy with getting out. And when you're in the midst of it, your brain is not in a place that it can plan that strategy. Right. Your amygdala, the lizard brain, that is your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, it is firing off, and you are trying to self-protect, and you don't have the bandwidth to create a plan. You're just reacting. You're trying to protect yourself. But sometimes our initial reactions are not the way that we actually protect ourselves. And that's where knowing it's going on and having the bandwidth to find a coach who could work with you on that and walk you through what are the best steps to take for you, not for anybody, but the best steps in your situation. That's the beginning of developing strategy. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward. What I thought maybe we would do now is maybe you can share some stories from the field of people you worked with and how they changed their perspective on what was happening to them, how to move forward after they worked with you?
So the way that I work with my clients is not in an hourly basis. I'm a hand-holding coach, so they pay for chunks of my time, months at a time. So in the course with that, I help them. This is the one thing I probably do the most for my clients is I help them with their communication with their soon-to-be ex. So I have them write to me exactly what they want to say and how they want to say it to their soon-to-be ex. So there's colorful language in there. And we start with that. And it's kind of interesting. I'll take that. I'll clean all the emotion out of that. I'll send it back. It still says what they were trying to say, only we've cut out the explanations because explanations aren't necessary. We cut out all the emotion. We send it back. I do that enough times. I see my clients start to be able to do it for themselves. They start to speak slower to me. They start to speak softer to me. They start to take advantage of their time alone without the children and do self-care. And they do this naturally. This becomes a natural thing for them because I've taken the emotion out. And what is interesting that I get to see from the other side, from their soon-to-be ex, is their soon-to-be ex starts being less aggressive because my client is no longer being aggressive, no longer having to defend themselves. And so the aggressor is no longer being aggressive. They either go find another person to be aggressive with. They lose interest in communication. I have one client that right now, when we started working months ago, he was receiving no less than 14 texts in probably 3-4 hours from his soon-to-be ex. And it caused him to have a car accident because he thought he needed to respond right now. So we have cleaned everything out. We ended up having to put her in a fishbowl. So because I come from the mediation aspect, a fishbowl means that we've attached either his attorney and or myself to all communication. So now, even if she communicates back to him without attaching anybody, he screenshots that, puts it back into another message that now either has me and or the attorney attached to that. And what's happened is now he gets less than one text a week. Those are the things that I see happen just by taking the emotion out of the communication.
But that's huge because what you just shared, not just taking the emotion out, but creating an environment where the verbal attacker knows that it's not private anymore, that other people are going to see their language, because so much of that narcissist playbook is that everybody else sees them as the perfect person and they are charming and wonderful and have loads of friends. They don't have the outside world see them when they're harassing and abusive and angry and aggressive. And so putting up that or enveloping that in the fishbowl so that they know every communication is going to be seen by everyone. That is an amazing tactic to get people to reduce the volume and to slow down with the heat. So great tool, great tool. What else? What do you think that my audience needs to hear from you that you haven't been able to share yet?
Well, it's super important to realize that abuse can come in many forms. You know, we don't see sexual abuse used in marital relationships, but I was forced to have sex with my ex-husband. He got on top of me. I was crying. He knew that I didn't want to be there and do that. And yet that happened. Now, we understand that as a sexual abuse, but even using things, my late husband was sexually abused by his wife in the fact that she and him went to bed one night and he started getting lovey with her and she allowed him to have sex with her. And the next morning she asked him, she said, Did you ask if you could have sex with me last night? He said, no. She says, then you are going to, and she made him go tell all of his 6 children that he raped her last night. That is sexual abuse. She didn't not respond, and she didn't verbally respond at all. And she waited. She set that whole thing up to use that and forced him to tell his children that he raped his mother, their mother.
That is really challenging. That's got to be something that breaks you. And so what we're hearing is how hard it is to acknowledge when you're being abused and to not succumb to it. And what Tina and I try to do with our clients is give them an avenue that's a safe haven. And we are people that don't have a stake in their soon-to-be ex's life. So we're not a friend. We're not a family member. We're not extremely angry at them, and we're also not trying to protect them. So coaches are the people who can tell you, all right, this is what I hear happened. I'll repeat it back to you. Did I get that right? And what does that sound like to you when I say it that way? So that people can start to reframe, so they start to understand what's going on and what they need to do to walk through it. So if you needed to leave my audience with one thing as we walk out, because we are getting to the end of time, what would you want them to remember?
One is that both men and women go through abuse. We see more women that go through it, partly because men won't. And I want you to communicate. When things happen, communicate this with your friends. Kind of have a sounding board, because sometimes what goes on is not appropriate. And we may think that it is something that happens in everybody's relationship. Like, I thought fighting was just a normal thing in my relationship. Come to find out the way things were going was not normal. And then having physical contact with me was not a good thing. We want to make sure that we communicate that. And then when we realize and connect those dots, reach out and ask for help.
Yeah.
Get professional help. Don't get your friend down the street who went through a divorce, because they're only going to share their experience. We divorce coaches have not just great training, but we also have our own experience, and we have the experience of all of the clients we've worked with all of these years.
Yeah. And that's a big deal. You pick an attorney based on their experience and their reputation, and you pick a divorce coach based on their commitment and their trust in you. Their trust in you that you actually know what happened, and you actually have a stake in this that you deserve. And so we're the ones who help you remember that you have value. So if something is going on that you feel is not right, say something, get help, find the support. So Tina could be your support. Tina, please share with my audience how they can find you.
Well, so my website is divorcecoachspecialist.com. You can email me at tina.huggins.sc@gmail. That's tina.huggins.sc@gmail.com. And anybody that gets a hold of me from this, I have free offers that you can work into the program, and that way you get the support that you need. And again, you want to make sure that you reach out, that you ask for that help, because without asking, you won't have the help.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for being on the show, Tina. As always, I welcome you to the Divorce Clarity Studio. Your voice is important, and we need to hear it. For my audience, you can always find me at www.lzlcoaching.com or email me, lisa@lzlcoaching.com. Until the next time at the Divorce Clarity Studio. See you then.